And good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am back, and today we're going to be implementing a very basic weapon. So if I hit play, you'll see crosshairs show up. You have this AK-47 here, and when you hit fire, you get a nice loud bang, and you send these things flying. And also there's a very subtle effect of the gun moving depending on what you are aiming at. Alright, so that's basically what we're going to go over today. I just want you to keep this in mind, that the classes that we're creating are going to change in future tutorials, but we're just getting a very, like I said, a basic implementation of the two classes. So the first thing we're going to do is create a class called base entity. And basically what base entity is going to be, it's going to be a base class that all of your characters or AI or anything like that is going to extend from. We do it this way so that we can create like generic functions and properties that can be used by all the classes, and it just keeps things consistent. And all that sort of stuff. So what we are going to do is, in my scripts, we will create a new C# script, and we will call it base entity. Alright, and we'll open that up. Alright, now this is, like I said, this is going to change in the future, so this class right now is just going to be very, very basic. So what we're going to do is we're going to be using the serialize field attribute again. So serialize field, and we will go with the keyword protected instead of private and public, and we will just put in base weapon. It's a class we haven't created yet. We're going to be doing that next. And we'll just call it current weapon and set it to null. Alright, just to get rid of these errors, we'll create the base weapon class really quickly. So create a new C# script, base weapon, and then we'll just head on back into our base entity class and wait for monodevelop to refresh, and we're good. Alright, now basically all this class is going to do right now is just fire the weapon if you push the mouse down. Okay, so we're going to create the update loop, so void update. And we're going to check if the weapon is null before we do anything. So current weapon is not equal to null. So if it's not equal to null, we're going to check if the player has pushed the left mouse button down. So if input dot get mouse button down, and 0 is usually the index for the left mouse button. Alright, so if the person has just pushed the mouse button down, current weapon dot fire. Alright, and fire function is something we have to create still. And that's it for the class for right now. Alright, so we're getting the errors for the base weapon, so we'll open that up and we'll fill it out. Alright, so now that we have base weapon open, we'll create some variables, and we'll get the functions going. So first we'll just create the fire function to get rid of that error. So just public void fire. Alright, and then the errors will be gone. And now let's create all the variables that base weapon is going to be using. Okay, so the first variable we're going to create is just going to be an audio clip, and that's just going to be the firing sound when we push the mouse button down. So we're going to be using that serialize field attribute again, and protected audio clip shot fired audio, and I'll set the null. Now, if you're wondering why I'm using protected instead of public or instead of private, the difference between the three is public is accessible by any class that has reference to the base weapon class or whatever class has a public variable in it. Private means that it's only accessible within this class, so within the script you can only use private variables. And protected is really similar to private, except protected is also accessible from any class that extends from base weapon or whatever class has a protected variable in it. So we create a base weapon class that's just going to hold all the base properties and the base functions. And let's say we make an AK-47 class or a Desert Eagle class that extends from base weapon. Anything that is protected will also be accessible in those classes, but they won't be accessible in like base entity or head bob or anything else. It'll just be the classes that extend from base weapon. Okay. So we have our audio clip. Now we're going to have another serialized field attribute and protected particle system. Particles. And we'll just go muzzle flash and set that to null. And I'm setting these to null basically as a future reminder that I need to set these in the editor. That's just the way I do it. You can leave these as blank and it won't even matter. It's just a reminder for me. And we're going to create a third one and serialize field again. Protected texture 2D, and this is going to be the crosshair texture. So we're going to be using the GUI system to put a crosshair in the center of the screen. Okay. Alright. Now that we have our variables, we can start doing stuff with them. So in our start function, we're going to create, we're going to check and see if the audio source on this object is null, and if it is, we're going to add an audio source because we need an audio source to play the shot fired audio. Alright, so we'll just go if audio is equal to null, game object dot add component audio source. Alright, and then we'll just set the clip of the audio source to the shot fired audio. Alright, so now that we have start taken care of, in our update loop we're going to implement that really subtle effect of the gun moving slightly depending on what you're aiming at. Right? So to do this, basically we're going to raycast out from the end of the gun and figure out how far away the closest object is, and we're going to slightly shift the rotation of the gun depending on how far away it is. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to create a raycast hit, and we'll just call it hit info since it's storing all the info of our raycast. And we'll create an if statement, and if physics dot raycast. Alright, and we're going to use a function in the camera class. So we're going to grab the main viewing camera. So we go camera.main, and we're going to go screen point to ray. Alright, and what this function does is it grabs a point on the screen and it casts a ray from that point directly out to which direction the camera is facing. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to get the center point on the screen and cast a ray out to figure out where the gun needs to aim. Alright, so to do that we need to create a vector 3 to pass into screen point to ray. and the x is going to be screen.width times 0.5. Alright, so we're dividing it by 2 essentially. And screen.height times 0.5. And that's good. Alright. And we need to grab the information and put it into hit info. So we go out, hit info. And it doesn't make much sense to raycast farther than 100 meters because the difference in angles that the gun's going to have is going to be so small that you're not even going to notice it. So I just put in 100 for the maximum distance. Alright, so we grab the main camera, we get the screen point, which is the very center of the screen, and turn it into a ray that's casting directly out in front of us. Grab the stuff in hit info, and we make sure the ray stops at 100 meters. Alright. Now we basically what we do is we change the forward vector of our transform. So we go transform.forward is equal to, and in brackets we're just going to do some vector subtraction. So we're going to subtract the point that the raycast hits from our current position. Alright, so we'll go hit info.point minus transform.position. Alright, and dot normalized. Alright, so we get the normalized vector. So we only want a normalized vector so that it's just the forward and the right vectors are unit vectors. So if you get the magnitude of them, it's only going to equal 1. So we make sure that we set it to a normalized vector so things don't get all wacky. Alright, it says we have an error here. And I'm assuming I was missing a, yes, I was missing a bracket. Alright. So we set the forward position of the gun to the hit point of the raycast if it hits anything, and if it doesn't hit anything we still need to handle that. So we will just create a vector 3 called point, and we're going to grab the main camera again, and instead of screen point to ray, we're going to use a function called screen point to world point, or screen to world point. Okay, so screen to world point, and we're going to pass in a vector 3 again, and so we're going to go screen.width times 0.5 again, screen.height times 0.5 again, and this time we're going to pass in a z. We didn't here because we didn't need to, but here we do, and we're going to pass in 100. Alright, so the reason we do that is the screen to world point is going to be figuring out which point in the actual world the x and y of the screen is at 100 meters away from the camera. Okay? Alright. Now that we have that point, we are going to do the exact same thing we did up here. So we'll go transform.forward is equal to point minus transform.position dot normalized. Alright. Yay! So that's basically all you need to do to rotate the gun based on what you're looking at. And it's just a really subtle effect, but it makes a difference. Alright, so now we're going to handle the fire command. So in base entity, when we click the mouse button down, we call the fire function, or the fire method. So now we're going to fill it out. So when you hit the fire function, or when you click the fire button, we're going to play our audio. So audio.play, and we're also going to we're also going to play the particle system. So muzzle flash.play, and we're going to get some hit info. So like up here, we'll make a raycast hit and call it hit info. And what we're going to do is create an if statement, and if physics.raycast, and what we're going to do is we're going to cast a ray from the end of the gun, or where the muzzle flash is being played, because we're just going to pretend that the bullets are spawning out of that position, and we're going to send the ray out directly forward and figure out what the gun is hitting. Okay, so muzzle flash dot transform dot position, so that's our starting point. Transform dot forward is our direction, and out hit info is where we're going to store the hit information of the raycast. Alright, so we created the base entity, and that's basically going to be things that you can interact with. So what we're going to do is we're going to check and see if the object has a base entity on it, and if it does, we're going to do something specific, and if it doesn't, we're going to do something else. All right, so or something else. So we're going to go hitinfo.collider.get component base entity not equal null. All right, so if the base entity on whatever object we return from our raycast, if the base entity is not equal to null, we are going to go hitinfo.rigidbody.add force at position, and we'll go just the forward force, whatever direction we're facing, and times it by 3000 just to send the thing flying. And we're going to apply that force at the point that we clicked. So hitinfo.point. Alright, and we'll just make a debug log, and just be like die. Alright, and now if we didn't hit something that had a base entity, we'll just debug.log something else. So debug.log you're tearing me apart, Lisa. Alright, so when we hit fire, the audio will play, the muzzle flash will play. We'll figure out if we hit a base entity, and if we did, we'll add a force to it and tell it to die. And if we don't, we'll repeat a line from a really horrible romantic movie. Alright, so we have the update and we have the fire, so now we need to take care of the actual crosshair so we can figure out where we're actually aiming at. Alright, so we're going to go with the onGUI function. So this is going to be a really quick one. Basically, we're just going to use the draw texture command from the GUI function, and we're going to pass in a rect, and this rect is going to be screen.width times 0.5, so halfway into the screen, minus 25, screen.height times 0.5, minus 25 again, and 50 and 50. And then we're going to go with the crosshair texture next. Alright, so you gotta remember that GUI draws its textures from a pivot point in the top left corner. So we need to offset the position that we're drawing from so that the entire texture is centered. Alright, so we're drawing the texture at 50 pixels by 50 pixels, wide and tall. So we take away 25 pixels from the X and the Y so that the crosshair is centered properly. Alright, so yeah, so we we get that position, we toss in our crosshair texture, and it should be good to go. Alright, so we have the script set up. Now we can set up our game objects. Alright, so we'll wait for Unity to go. And it says that we made a boo-boo, so let's go back here. Probably just a typing error. It says that it does not take 3 parameters. And right here is our issue. So screen point to right only takes this vector 3, but we missed the closing bracket and added it on the end. So we will get rid of that, and we will put it right here at the end of the vector, and that should solve the issue. Alright, so basically my mistake here. Screen point array only takes a vector, and then the rest of the variables go into the raycast method. Okay, so if you followed along perfectly, you'll get the same error I did. Show you how to fix it. If not, then whatever. Alright, so the scripts are finished, don't have any errors. Now we can set up our character. Alright, so we'll get rid of this stuff. Basically start from scratch. Get rid of the particle system, get rid of that weapon, and we will get rid of our whatever scripts. Alright, so right now we're where we were when we left off the last tutorial. We need to create the actual weapon object, we need to create the particle effect that's being created or sent, and we just need to attach everything. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create the weapon. So we'll drag in our AK-47. Alright, now this is something you want to watch out for. Depending on how your modeling program or whatever is set up, the X, Y, and Z of your weapon can change. For example, in Unity, Z is forward, but in whatever modeling program that this AK-47 was built in, the Z was to the side and X was forward. So we're going to have to manipulate the gun in a way so that the Z is facing forward. Now this weapon you can grab off of the asset store. The link will be in the description. Yeah. So how are we going to change this so that the Z is facing forward? And the way I normally do this is I'll create an additional game object and parent whatever weapon or object I want underneath it, and then manipulate the object underneath the empty game object, and I'll reference the parent object in the scene. I'll show you what I mean. So I'm going to create a new game object, so Control-Shift-N, and I'll drag AK underneath the game object, and we'll call game object weapon. Alright, so first thing we're going to do is zero out the position so it's exactly where our weapon is. Alright, and I'm going to rotate AK-47 90 degrees to the left. Alright, so let's go -90. Alright, so now when you click on the weapon, its Z is forward. Alright? Alright, and then we're just going to attach our base weapon script that we created onto our weapon object. Alright? So now we can start to assign all these properties in the editor. So first we'll set our shots fired audio. Now I grabbed the artillery assault package off the asset store. It's completely free, and the link will be in the description. And I'm just going to grab a random audio clip. Alright, and we're going to set our crosshair texture, and I just grabbed this off of Google Images. I just looked up crosshair. I'll even toss the link to that in the description, because why not. And we need to create a particle system for the muzzle flash. Alright, so that's what we'll do now. I'm not going to go crazy in detail with the particle system, I'm just going to show you how to get the effect that I created for this, and the particle system will be a much more in-depth tutorial later down the road. So first we're going to go to Game Object, Create Other, and create a particle system. And you get this fancy little thing. Alright, and let's call the particle system muzzle flash, that way we know what it's supposed to be. Right. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to position the muzzle flash at the end of the barrel. Alright, so we'll just drag it over there, and that looks close enough, and then we'll rotate it so that the particles are actually, coming out of the barrel. So, bam, fancy. And next we will drag muzzle flash underneath the weapon. Alright, so now that the game object is set up, we can actually fiddle around with the particle system and make it look like a muzzle flash. Alright, so first thing I'm going to do is change the start size, and we'll make it really small, so 0.05, and we get much smaller particles. And our shape, we'll change the shape. We don't want it to spawn out of this giant cone, because then it doesn't look like it's coming out of the hole of at the end of the gun. So we'll change the radius down to really small. Now it looks like they're flying out. Alright, and the next thing we want to do is change the emission. Alright, so we don't want a constant stream of particles coming out, we just want it to be a burst. So we'll set the rate to 0, and we're going to add a burst. So there's this little plus sign down here, we'll click that, and that should be good enough. Alright, bam, isn't that fancy? Alright, so now if we just click on weapon and click on our muzzle flash, should be good to go. Alright, now we're going to attach our base entity to the first person character we created. So we'll just drag base entity right on there, and we'll drag our weapon onto current weapon. Alright, now there's going to be a slight little bit of setup with the first person character as well. In the future, we're going to be all the weapons are going to be under a basically a weapon point. That way you can swap weapons out, and they'll all be sitting at the exact same point. You don't need to manually set its position. So to make that easier, down the road, I'm going to create another new game object. So Control-Shift-N, create a game object, and under first person camera, we'll drag that in there, and we'll just call it weapon position. Alright, now we're going to drag our weapon underneath weapon position, and then we will zero out the position. That way it's exactly where the weapon position is. Right. Next we're going to drag the weapon position so that our AK-47 looks right in the main camera. Right. So right now you can't even see the weapon, so what we're going to do is we're going to drag our weapon position around so that we get that nice view of the weapon that we did at the start of the video. Right, so we'll just kind of move it around, figure out which works best, and sure, looks fantastic. Alright, now everything should be set up, so if we hit play, we get this nice, see the gun moving around and all that good stuff. Particle effect is playing, which it shouldn't be, but when we click, we get this nice little particle effect. Alright, quick fix with the particle effect, it's set on looping, turn that off. Now when we hit play, particle effect will play once, but it won't continually play even though we're not trying, or we're not clicking the button. Alright, and to make it stop playing as soon as we hit start, we'll uncheck play on awake. Alright, so we can move around, we can fire, get these nice fancy particles. And now we want to actually test out and see if the raycasting is work, if it's going to add the force to a base entity like we had said in the script. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to create a cube. Alright, we're going to create a cube, and we'll just kind of drag it out here. And we'll add our base entity script to the cube. Alright, and in our script we also referenced a rigid body, so we'll go to component, physics, rigid body. Alright, so now we have the base entity attached to the cube and a rigid body. So we'll just duplicate it using Control D, duplicate it, and make a couple of them. So now when we hit play and we fire and we're aiming at our cubes, it should add a force. But it doesn't do that to anything else, right? Because these have the base entity script attached to them. Alright. Isn't that fancy? Alright, and you know, this was just a really basic implementation of a weapon. Down the road we're going to be going a lot more in depth with like ammo and weapon pickups and swapping weapons out and that sort of thing. But I just wanted to get the very, very basics in there beforehand. Because you need to make sure something works before you start going crazy and adding in a whole ton of features. Alright? So that's good for now, and I will see you guys next time. As soon as the player stays in the trigger. Alright, so now you should be able to hit play, go play in the fire, get burned, and eventually die. Which sounds like fun.